Recently, I did a video on my Nintendo 64 setup and kind of went over some of the things I did to clean it up and revive it essentially, and some of the games that I've been playing on it. However, in the midst of doing that, I realized that my old AV wires that came with my Nintendo 64 had pretty much, I don't know if you want to say fell apart, but they stopped working. And so I had to look at some alternatives, and I decided that since I'm using a semi HD monitor, I say semi because I think this thing only produces like 720 or something, but I figured why not get a HDMI style wire for the N64 and see what's out there. And I did a little bit of research on Amazon and also tried to keep this as economical as possible. And I decided on a $10 set for this N64, and in this video I'm going to go over them, some of the things that I really like about them, as well as some of the minor deficits to them. So let's take a look. So to start, these wires come from a company that I'm not going to tell you I've actually heard of. They're just a brand that appears on Amazon called Auto Outlet or Aut Outlet, however you say that. Essentially, the wires are pretty straightforward. Now, these aren't a converter style box or a device, as I understand, that really does a whole lot of filtering. So what I mean by that is it's not like a M Classic or some of the other HDMI style devices that I've seen out there that essentially are taking a AV signal using some sort of hardware upscaler and then running it through the wires into the device that it's plugged into. As I understand, this is essentially just straight interfacing between analog to digital, and there's nothing special happening in between. So in other words, there's not some sort of hardware based upscaler built into these. Now, to kind of give you some context to that though, do these look clearer than the AV wires? To me, they look a little sharper, and I'm gonna get into that in a moment. But as far as the setup goes, they're pretty straightforward. Plug it into the back of the N64 like normal. However, you do need some sort of USB-based power to get these going. So this TV itself that I'm using behind me, it has that port, so I just plugged it into that port. You can see that little thing light up on the wire, and then you plug the wire into the HDMI slot. Very simple setup. Now, one of the things that I noticed immediately, however, is when you plug this in, there is actually some sort of interface built into this wire, because you end up seeing that it says no signal, and it also seems to understand what sort of signal it's going through with the N64, so it shows that it's using a North American based interfacing signal versus whatever else is out there, and also shows the AV sign at the top. When you're on this screen though, this blue screen, and this is one of the things that I heard some people claim that this was happening throughout all of usage on this device. I only noticed this on this blue screen before you turn the N64 on, that there's a bit of a buzzing noise, and there is. So there's like a minor buzzing noise. I did not hear it at all, even on higher volumes, on the actual games, only on this blue screen. So maybe that's something that's faulty with this device. I'm not sure, but it's not something that I was able to discern beyond this blue screen. Now, as far as the actual output goes, one of the cool things is on the actual HDMI itself, the HDMI wire or port, as you call it, there's a built-in physical switch that can change between widescreen and 4:3 essentially, which is the original aspect ratio for N64. So whatever device you're plugging this into, you can actually switch that on the fly, and it changes the screen on the fly to that different sizing. And again, the interface that's built into this cord itself also shows at the top corner what sort of aspect ratio that you're in, which I thought was pretty cool. Now, one of the other things though that I want to highlight is the actual screen fidelity. So I'm not going to say that this is a massive leap over the AV wires, but there seems to be a minor clarity boost, and I'm wondering if this actually has to do more with the TV itself upscaling because it's using HDMI versus this actually having anything special about this wire configuration. Because I've seen some reviews report that it was almost identical. I did test between the two, and I did notice a slight difference when I ran this through HDMI on this TV versus running it through AV, which, just so we're aware, barely works at this point. It flickers on and off sometimes, but it appears there is a bit of a difference. Now, am I gonna say that's a selling feature for this device? Probably not. However, I want to emphasize these are 10 bucks. And for $10 for what I'm trying to accomplish on this little setup back here, I think these are really good bang for your buck. One of the big concerns I was worried about was because they were so cheap. I've used cheap HDMI converter ports, whatever you want to call them, for other devices like my Wii, and I've noticed a lot of issues with that in terms of like screen flickering and fidelity issues. I didn't notice that here. These are very simple, straightforward, easy to use, and best of all, they're incredibly affordable. So if you're looking for something to, I'm not gonna necessarily say boost your N64 experience, but something that you can use it on a modern display, I think these are worth the $10 investment that I spent.